Okay, so we've finished with microeconomics, so it's time to move on to macroeconomics. And I guess everybody kind of says, well, what's the difference? And I mean, I guess the answer is in the name. Yeah, so a macro view is looking at a broader level. So what we're going to do here when we look at macroeconomics is we're going to look at the economy as a whole. That doesn't mean we're literally just going to look at the whole lump. Yeah, but what we're going to do is look at the economy in bigger chunks than we did with micro. So in microeconomics, we looked at what determines, for example, the wage of a particular job. In macro, we're going to look at the labour market as a whole. So we're going to look at all jobs. We're going to look at unemployment. In micro, we looked at what determines the price of oil. Here, in macro, we're going to look at the price of everything. Yeah, we're going to look at the aggregate price level in the economy, and we're going to look at inflation and so on. So that's the difference, is that we're taking a further step back. We're trying to understand much more about what it is that governments care about in the real world, and how they can bring about the things that they care about, how they can achieve those objectives. So what is it that governments care about? And I think one of the things that you're most often likely to see when you look at the news, is governments are always talking. They're always talking about GDP, gross domestic product. And I think you may have studied geography before, but even so, you probably only have a hazy idea of what GDP is. What it is really is the value of everything that's produced in the UK. And by produced, we mean essentially any transaction. So coming to Doverbrooks, when you pay for the fees, that's GDP. If you go to Costa for a coffee, that's GDP. If you buy a new car, the value of that car, that's GDP. If you buy a new marker pen, that's GDP. So GDP is the entire value of everything that's produced in an economy. And there are a variety of ways of measuring it, and we'll come back to that later. So governments care about GDP. They want GDP, generally speaking, to be high, because that means that if the value of output is high, that means that the value of incomes that people can earn from working is high, and so on and so forth. And what they generally want is they want GDP to grow. So hence, one of the things that governments care about is economic growth. What they would like, generally speaking, is GDP to be rising in a sustained, not too quick, we'll see why in a minute, not too slow, we'll see why in a minute, but they want the economy to be growing. Part of the reason they want that is that what governments don't like is they don't like unemployed people, because unemployed people are sad, and sad people don't vote for them. There are other reasons, and again, we'll have a quick look at that in a minute. But the second reason, the second thing that governments care about is they care about the level of unemployment in an economy. Generally speaking, obviously, they would prefer unemployment to be low. Anybody who's studied history, will perhaps have looked at the Great Depression in the United States, the Wall Street crash, and so on, and that had very negative, kind of social and economic consequences. And thirdly, again, anybody who's studied history, probably at various points you'll have come across the German hyperinflation of the 1920s, or more recently in places like Zimbabwe and Venezuela. What governments don't really like is prices spiralling out of control. And because essentially that wipes out the incomes of anybody with savings, pensioners and so on. So governments care about trying to keep inflation under control. And in the UK, different countries have different targets. In the UK, there's a target for inflation, of 2%. So what inflation means, therefore, but 2% inflation means prices rise, by 2% every year. It's under the control of the Bank of England. There's a margin for error of plus or minus 1%. But essentially what we're saying is, we want prices not to be rising too quickly. There's a reason that we don't aim for zero, which is that falling prices, which is what's called deflation, isn't so great either. And again, we'll come on to all this. But roughly speaking, what do governments care about? They want the economy to be growing. They want people to have jobs. They want money not to be losing its value. They want prices to be reasonably stable. Those are the big three. Then, fourthly, governments also care about the what's called the current account of the balance of payments. And that's kind of the difference between exports and imports. Generally speaking, governments prefer their economy to be earning more money from selling things to foreign countries, than we spend on buying things from those countries. And that's very simple. It's like if we're making stuff and selling it to other people, that creates lots of jobs. It helps to increase GDP and so on and so forth. If you look at the growth of countries like China, a lot of their growth came from increasing sales of products on world markets, generating income in that way. A fifth thing that governments care about is their own finances. So they care about what's the budget balance. So they care about the gap between government spending on the one hand and tax on the other, because if they spend more than they tax, the government's going to have to borrow, which increases the national debt. And then there are some other objectives which governments generally care about. Sixthly, they care about inequality, which we talked about. In micro. And likewise, the environment, global warming, all that type of stuff. I'm putting those not because they're less important, but because we kind of looked at those elsewhere. So those are the big things that governments are attempting to achieve, as part of their macroeconomic policy. And in a minute, we'll say, well, what policies do they have available to them?